Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. Aim of the podcast, I'm here to talk off the stories of film. I tend to talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, behind the scenes stories, all the bits and bobs really that go to make the films that we know and sometimes love, the films that we know and sometimes love. Now, what you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a filmmaker or someone to do with the making of film, an actor, director, and talk about their work, talk about a film that they're up to, but get their stories from their side of the fence. And I'm absolutely thrilled for this one to be joined by someone whose work I've been watching for such a long time and enjoying, Colm Meaney. Now, he is starring in a new independent action thriller called Confession, which has been released by Signature here in the UK on demand, on video on demand services at the end of January 2022. It's written and directed by David Beaton. It's effectively a two-hander for the most part, alongside Stephen Moyer. Claire Hope-Ashiti's in the ensemble as well. But ostensibly, he's here to talk, as you'll hear in the conversation, about that movie. But we also go and cover quite a lot of other bits and bobs as well. So we're going to talk about a few Alan Parker films that he was involved in. The late director Alan Parker. We talk about Come See the Paradise. We talk about The Commitments. We talk about The Road to Wellville. There's one bit where I start talking about a Windsor Flight. And if you're unfamiliar with the reference, it's me talking about the 1990 action sequel Die Hard 2 Die Harder, in which Colm Meaney has a very small role, but he tells a brilliant story about that. I should note that we were both sort of a little bit COVID-y at this point, and so this one is recorded over Zoom. Do bear that in mind when listening to the audio. There is one bit I couldn't get out of dog bark and doorbell, but other than that, I think this one's come out okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set it up by playing you a clip from the trailer for Confession, and then we'll go into the conversation with Colm the other side of this.
I'm afraid I was just about to lock up for the night.
I talk, you listen, you understand? How many exit points are there in this church?
4.
Just start by locking this one.
If you don't get that seen to, you're going to be in serious trouble in no time.
It's too late for me. I'm already dead. Every damn skeleton is coming out tonight, I promise you that.
Well, he's always there, no matter what.
I wouldn't be so sure, not after what I've done.
I'll let you know when it's done.
Is there someone here you haven't told me about?
The door in there was open before I locked it.
Why didn't you tell me?
You had a gun to my head.
So that was a clip from Confession, a new film, and I'm delighted to be joined by one of its co-star, Colm Meaney, who's joining us from somewhere really nice looking, actually. Do you mind me being intrusive and finding out where you are? Can I come over to your house?
No, hey, hi, how are you, son? I'm in, this is like the home base in Europe. We theoretically we split the time between here and Los Angeles, but it's, we're mostly here, and this is in Mallorca.
Oh, I'll be round for tea. That'd be great.
Oh, do give us a shout, yeah, because I don't know, do you spend a bit of time here?
No, I live in the West Midlands, which is a slightly less glamorous version of that, but I can kind of spin it a little bit.
Listen, not going for the West Midlands, you know.
Oh no, I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of it, but I know what it is and I know what it isn't, and it isn't Mallorca. So, I mean, can you just set up Confession for us? If I could just talk to that first, and just tell us a little bit about this one.
Well, it's a film, but basically two characters. There's a third character comes in about halfway through, but it's late at night in Boston. A priest. We're in a church and a priest is just closing up for the night. And this guy kind of comes in with, played by Stephen Moyer, comes in with a gunshot wound. And I try to help him as best I can, and I try to find out what's going on. basically the film then unfolds around the fact that he says he's a cop, and then when this other character comes in, she says she's a cop and she's after him, and the priest is kind of totally confused about who's right, who's wrong, what is going on here. And it's kind of like the Stephen's character, and I play the priest, are basically kind of at loggerheads at the beginning, and then come to some sort of an understanding and start to share their life stories, and realize they have things in common.
I should point out you're ratcheting up these priest roles at the minute. I watched Pixie at the middle of last year. It's like that's more priests with guns, isn't it? You've got a bit of a
but I wasn't a priest in that one.
No, but there were priests with guns.
No.
You were Tolkien, you're a priest. Secrets of Emily Blair, I think you're a priest in that. You can't deny your priesthood, surely.
Well, no, I tell you what it is. I mean, I think these things happen for an actor in cycles. You know, you go through a cycle of playing priests. and then you go through a cycle of playing bad guys. And then you go through a cycle of playing detectives. And, you know, I think it speaks to perhaps the imagination of people in the industry, or lack thereof, that they say, oh, look, he's a priest in that. He'd be a good priest in this, you know? So
I think there's your last career role should be a crime-solving priest, I think, who just travels the world, just exotic.
Well, like a Father Brown.
Yeah, I think so. I know they've sort of done it before, but you could put a spin on that.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. Very good idea, Sam.
10%.
Pass that on.
10%. I mean, I'm a real fan of films that just put two good actors in a room and let them act against each other. I'm a huge fan of that. And
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, I enjoyed this. I just like the fact that the two of you are just clearly just like, I mean, locked in a room. Presumably it's a lockdown film to a degree, in that, you know, it's two people, secluded location, and one of a series of films of this ilk, I think, that came together really quite quickly. But when you get to something like that, as much as it's fun for me on the outside, what's the preparation, particularly when it's an indie film? Are the two of you thrown into a room and you've got a day or two to work all this out?
Very much so. I mean, on this one, I mean, first of all, I mean, this script, when I read it, I was blown away by it. You know, it's like you don't get many great acting roles like this anymore. You know, there's not many scripts where you have real characters really engaging with each other. You know, they're thin on the ground nowadays. So, and I also felt it had a really sort of, you know, film noir-y kind of quality to it that I loved. So I was thrilled to do it, and I desperately wanted to do it. And then realized we're going to shoot this in 14 days. Which we did, which I thought was impossible. But we did. We shot it in 14 days. And of course it was helped by the fact it was, you know, small cast, one location, all that. But it was tough. And we were very much, as you say, kind of like, we couldn't get together beforehand for rehearsals. So I think Steve and I had literally a day or two beforehand to just talk through it and then start shooting it. That was it.
Because if I've got this right as well, you had another film that came together, because I think Unwritten Unwelcome? Sorry, John Wright's film. I think that only got a green light, and was filming a few months later as well. It just seems to lockdown, for all its downsides, seemed to have accelerated getting some indie films off the ground.
Well, it did, and in a way it did, because I think, you know, when things like in 2020, like March, things just worldwide just shut down, you know, for me anyway. I think for most people. And then August of 2020, things started to open a little bit. And I think there was such a kind of a panic at the fact that nothing had been made for, you know, 6 months, 7 months. There was a kind of you know, we got to do something. So there was a kind of a rush, and a bunch of projects came together, you're right, very quickly.
Because I've been looking at a few interviews that you've been doing earlier today, and one of the things that you've said is that more recently you find that scripts come to you more fully formed than they used to. That they're far more complete and they're far more ready to go. And are you finding that particularly now, independent filmmakers are just getting it all together before they start attracting people in? Are you feeling the upside of that?
I think so. I think I was trying to figure, you know, what's changed, what's happened. I mean, But I think there's been an emphasis with, places like the BFI and the Irish Film Board in Ireland and around the world, basically, like places that support and develop film. There's been, because I think in the past, like 20 years or 25 years ago, a lot of scripts were not really ready.
Yeah.
And they got to the point of, and it's very hard to fix that, on the set.
Yeah.
So but I think there's been an awareness and an emphasis on training writers and training directors and producers in that area, and I think that's starting to bear fruit now.
Because I mean, if I got this right, you were clearly in the midst of Alan Partridge Alpha Papa, where I only bring this up because Steve Coogan has been completely candid about the fact that film was in a lot of flux while it was being made.
Yes.
They basically, and I read all the interviews you were doing at the time, and it's like everyone's facing it out, and I really like that film, but it just, the process of it sounded hell from where I was sat. And I'm just wondering if once you've been through something like that, and I'm not asking you to badmouth anything or something like that, but once you've had an experience of that, does that make you a little more wary, a little more cautious?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it was a very, very difficult experience, and it was I should say, flux is exactly the word. It was in a constant state of flux, and changing from minute to minute, let alone day to day. And that, a lot of that was due to the fact that of the personalities involved. Yeah. And a lot of it was to do with the fact that it wasn't sort of fully formed before we got there. You know? So it was kind of still, and some people like to work that way. Some people like to leave it floppy and fluid. And I don't. I like to have a good script to work off, because I feel as an actor, I feel people say, "Oh, great performance." I mean, when you get a great script, it's your job. It's like a musician. You just play the notes. You know what I mean? Play the notes as written, and it'll be and it'll be good. So I always feel better when a script is fully there. Yeah.
And so on something like Confession, where you've got the confidence that the script is fully there, and it was a single location in the UK, I think. You film it in a church,
yes,
I think,
yeah,
if I've got this right. Does that allow you just to have a little bit of fun around the side of it? Do you shoot something like that sequentially if all the building blocks are in place? What does that allow you?
No, we didn't really shoot sequentially. We did. We started out at the start of the film, and then we kind of jumped around a little bit. And some days we'd go, because we were shooting. The thing about shooting this in 14 days, the page count per day was enormous. I've never worked under, we were like on episodic television where you're, a well-oiled machine. You do 7-8 pages a day is a good day, a busy day. We were doing 12, 14, 15 pages a day on this.
Yeah.
It's a staggering amount of work.
Presumably, just the learning of that is
exactly. Well, that's exactly for Stephen and I. It was a brute. It was a brute to learn, But having said that, it was also just because of the sheer volume of it. But it was easy to learn as well, in the fact that it was well written. And well written words are always easier to learn than not well written. When something is well written, it has an emotional sort of through line that you relate to, and then you hang the dialogue off that kind of thing.
I should confess, I've been, and I think I can put it this way, because it is a compliment. I've been taking your performances for granted for years, because I've been watching your work for years, and just like, it's going to be good. And so I'm digging back into your history. What I hadn't appreciated, I think in the mid-'80s, you just upped sticks to America. And I couldn't find the story of what led to that. And I just wonder if you can take us, because that looks like a huge gamble.
Not really. I trained at the Abbey, the Irish National Theatre, and then I was in the company there every year. Then I moved to London. And I got involved with 784 theatre company, John McGrath, the great John McGrath's company. 784. It was a touring theatre company. And I was with them for a couple of years. I worked with Gavin Richards then in Belton Braces, another great socialist theatre company at the time. And then Thatcher came and slashed everybody's funding and destroyed the unions. And then I started sort of gravitating back to Dublin to work at the Abbey. And then I started going to New York for romantic reasons. And eventually, and we had known each other since childhood, my first wife, but she was living in New York and I was sort of back and forth. And what I do is I'd work in the UK or Ireland, make enough money to go back to New York and then hang out in New York for like as long as the money lasted, you know. So it was kind of like that. And then I eventually, you know, we got married and I moved to New York and worked out in New York for a couple of years, from like 82 to 84, I think, and worked a lot in the regional theatre, Chicago, Washington, Cleveland, and realized that New York, at the time New York was a theatre town. There was no film and television work really in New York, and except for daytime soaps. And I decided I didn't feel my mission in life was to bring classical theatre to the Midwest, you know, much as I loved the theatre. So we moved to Los Angeles and you know, started building, you know, episodic TV spots, things, and started the building blocks of a career out there. So it wasn't like a decision I made in Dublin or London to go to Hollywood, as it were. You know, it was very much a gradual progression, heading west all the time.
Conversely, there weren't that many people doing what you did, because I found a Washington Post piece with you, a profile piece that was written in 1997, and it says not many actors moved from Dublin to Broadway to Hollywood and back again. Fewer still managed to star in TV series like Star Trek Deep Space Nine and maintain enough credibility to be pursued by such respected film directors as Alan Parker and Stephen Frears. And notwithstanding the Star Trek snobbery in that, which I think is classic Washington Post, isn't it? It is true that, isn't it? I mean, what you were balancing there was hugely unusual, particularly for a non-American actor. Did you feel that?
Not really. No, not really. No, I felt I was... I'm meeting Alan Parker was a huge thing for me. I mean, I did come see The Paradise with Alan, which I think was like 91 or 92, and he told me when we were doing that he had this book which hadn't been published yet, The Commitments, you know. So Alan, you know, I thought, everybody, you know. We all talk about upcoming projects, you know, that never materialized. But it did. I mean, within 6 months, Alan had called and said he wanted to do it. He wanted me to come. He wanted everyone to be very much Dublin, you know, and it wasn't brilliant. And so I was surprised that he actually asked me to do it, because I was in Los Angeles and had been for, you know, I'd been in America for 10 years at that point, you know. But he did. And I went, and that reconnected me with Ireland in a way that probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. Yeah. Because in those days, you know, when you went away in the 80s, even if you went from Dublin to London, you were gone. You know, that was it. You didn't come back. You didn't hop back. And certainly you didn't hop from Dublin to Los Angeles and back, you know. Now, you know, young actors come out of drama school in Dublin and they go to Los Angeles for pilot season, you know. That's certainly wasn't the case then. So Alan reconnected me to that. And because of the Commitments, I did the Snapper with Stephen. And you know, going on from there. So I was very fortunate. I realized this at the time. I was fortunate that it was like I had two different careers. Yeah. You know, I had the Star Trek career going on the one hand, and the film career going on the other hand, you know. And I realized, I mean, it was partly by design, but I think also, as I say, Alan was the kind of the key factor in setting that in motion. I mean, you know, I was very, very sorry to see that Alan passed last year. It was very, you know, we lost a great man.
I mean, I agree. I mean, you did The Road to Wellville with him, which is the underrated Alan Parker film.
Absolutely,
that is hilarious. Rachel Portman's score to it is brilliant.
Yeah.
The whole Dr. Kellogg stuff is brilliant. I laugh my backside off.
Hopkins' performance is
great. It's great.
But my first day on that, I was shooting up upstate New York, and they'd been shooting for a few weeks, I think, and I arrived late in the afternoon, and so we back in the hotel, went over, and the second AD said, I think they're going over to watch some dailies. Do you want to go over watch dailies? I said, sure. So I snuck in there, and I sat down at the front, and I was in hysterics.
Yeah.
This performance by Hopkins.
Yeah.
The teeth and the voice,
the teeth, yeah.
sort of stuff, I was on the fucking floor laughing. And then the lights came up, and sitting up the back behind me, Parker and Hopkins. And Hopkins looks down and says, "Oh, you enjoyed that, did you? You enjoyed that, eh?" And I was like, "I'm sorry."
I mean, he'd won his Oscar a year or two before, hadn't he? And he wasn't known for comedy at all at that point. Yeah.
It was a genius performance.
I mean, whenever I read interviews with Alan Parker, and I've read quite a lot, I've listened to some of his commentary tracks, he comes across to someone on my side of the fence as someone who didn't suffer fools gladly at all,
no,
really. No. But conversely, actors speak very highly of him. And I just wonder if you can talk about him just personally.
Listen, Alan was, I think for actors, Alan was like a gift, he came from advertising. He didn't really come from the theatre like Stephen did. Stephen first, when he came from the theatre, came through BBC drama. But Alan came from advertising, and I don't know where he acquired this ability to communicate with actors, to understand actors, and always to give you a little bit of a jam of direction, and something. There was always some little comment here or there that just... It kind of reminded me of John Huston's. I did John Huston's Last Picture of the Dead, and I had this big dinner table, and I had this line to Freddie, the alcoholic son who's been sent off to a monastery to dry out, and I say to Freddie, well, he's going to Mount Mellery is the monastery, and I say to him, you'll get plenty of celery down at Mount Mellery, and Houston said after the patient, Colm, I think you should consider that line poetry. I said, what? I said, it's a joke. She said, no. I think you should perhaps try and deliver it as poetry. So we did the next take, and I delivered it as like poetry.
Yeah.
And it got a laugh. And it was like, fuck, Huston, the genius, you know what I mean? And Alan was like that too. Alan could just give you a little something. It's just incidental, but it should have unlocked something,
I mean,
and it was beautiful. It was great.
Angelica Houston's memoir talking about John Huston directing that film is really, really moving. That must have been quite an experience, just being in the midst of all of that.
It was.
I have to ask, because you're part of my Christmas ritual each year, that there's not a Christmas that goes by in my house where I don't wish for Windsor 114 to survive. And I mean, it's quite taken aback. Your very posh English accent piloting a plane to its doom, but you were in the world's most expensive film at that point. I think it's often forgotten that. Yeah, Die Hard 2 was the most expensive film of all time at the moment.
I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised. But here's the story behind that. That film saved my life. I was, the early days in Los Angeles, doing, bits of episodic, bits of this, bits of that. And myself and my brother, my buddy, James Lancaster,
co-pilot,
terrific actor, and he was the co-pilot. We were both hired on the film completely independently of each other. And we thought, fuck, great, something else is good, And we were hired on a daily rate, because we figured you'd shoot that out in 2 days the most, So we were hired on a daily rate. So we show up, first day in, they didn't shoot it, and they say, we're probably not going to shoot it tomorrow either. We'll give you a call early next week. Okay, fine. So off we go. Anyway, the end of the story is we ended up being 8 weeks on the film.
On a day rate?
On a day rate.
So you're the reason it was the most expensive film?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it gave us a shitload of money. And I actually, at the time, we were living in Sherman Oaks, and we were shooting at Universal. I was taking the bus down to Universal because my car was in the shop and I couldn't afford to get it out. By the end of that movie, I bought a brand new car. You know, sent the old one to the junkyard, bought a brand new Honda Accord, and we were laughing for the rest of the year. It was an extraordinary thing, because what they were doing was they were coming back to Universal to shoot those sequences, and then they'd hear there was snow at an airport in Canada.
I read that.
They were chasing the snow because there was no snow in Denver that year.
Yeah. And so there's you and James Lancaster, about 300 miles ahead of them, just shoveling the snow out of the way just to get your day rate going.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm coming to the end of my time. I do want to touch on Con Air as well, because inevitably that's a fact. I don't think you do an interview where Con Air doesn't come up. So I have to play by the rules.
Consistent, yes.
Yeah, I think so. But I talked to Simon West about that. And because he's often forgotten that was his directorial debut as well, in the middle of Bruckheimer, and he talks about that being like a very testosterone heavy, out on location, on set, sweltering heat, and a film pretty much unlike any that he's ever made since. And Con Air is just an absolute treat. He describes you as having this roguish twinkle in his eye that even if he's spouting reactionary theories on how to deal with prisoners, you listen to him and he entertains you at the same time. So please tell me that Con Air was as much of a joy for you as it has been for pretty much everyone else who's watched it since.
Well, that's very nice of Simon to say that. But yeah, it really was. It really was. It was a joy to do. And the interesting thing about it is that, most action things are the script doesn't really matter. The story doesn't matter. Yeah. It's just you're hanging, like a few scenes around action sequence after action sequence. That was a good script.
Yeah.
It was well written, and it was and Simon was terrific. He was the man to do it. And we had a terrific cast. I mean, just look at Buscemi and, Malkovich and Cusack and it was extraordinary. And we had such fun as a group together, we shot up in northern Utah, right on the Nevada state line, and the salt flats, and Utah is dry, of course, more or less dry.
No snow there,
and we were right at the state line, so right across the state line, literally like 200 yards down from the hotel, was a strip joint called American Bush, which was the only bar. I know, but that was the kind of, and like, you'd have, we finished the day, hey, wait, go down the bush tonight, go down the bush, have a few beers, and you just, it was that kind of a fun, rowdy, but hard work. I mean, long days as well, because we had incredibly complex action sequences. I mean, that plane, the plane coming down the strip in Vegas was extraordinary. And that
car.
thing, my car, dangling my car from the
ass
shop.
Kicker,
it was tough as well. That was like I think it took 4 or 5 days to get that.
So when are you writing your memoir?
Oh, this is getting worrying. The previous interview, these are 2 questions I've never had before.
Okay.
When am I writing my memoir? And an earlier interviewer asked me, how do you stay so fit for a man your age?
Okay, I'm not asking that. I'm asking about the Road to Wellville and memoirs. I know where I am. I bet they didn't bring Road to Wellville up.
Listen, Road to Wellville, I completely agree, is one of the most underappreciated.
Yeah, it really is.
Of all time. The other one I feel so sad about is a film I did with the great Goran Pascalovic, the great Serbian auteur, called How Harry Became a Tree.
Okay.
We had that at Venice Film Festival, and it was a huge hit at Venice. And talking all week about me getting Best Actor award at Venice and all that, which I knew was bullshit. But I don't mean that about Venice. I mean that about awards and anticipation of awards and all that. But then 9/11 happened. We were going from Venice to Toronto on the Tuesday,
Yeah.
9/11. And the film got completely lost in the whole shuffle after that, and so really nobody's ever seen it. But it's a film I'm hugely proud of, how Harry became a tree.
Well,
along with The Road to Welcome.
I'm going to go and seek that out, and I'll give that a watch. So you've got one more pair of eyeballs on it. Colm Meaney, this has been an absolute delight, and stay well. And I hope Mallorca is good to you. It's looking quite.
Thank you, thanks Simon, thanks so much. Real pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure.
All the best.
Take care.
Bye
Bye. And that brings to an end my conversation with Colm Meaney for the film Confession, which is out now from Signature Entertainment of our video on demand services. I should note too that in the midst of that conversation, Colm just dropped in the film The Snapper, directed by Stephen. What he was talking about there is the excellent film The Snapper, directed by Stephen Frears, which is the second of the Barrytown trilogy of films based on the books by Roddy Doyle. So The Commitments was the first, The Snapper was the second, and The Van was the third. And Colm Meaney is a constant throughout those films and is great in them. And I think that brings us to the end of this special episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your eardrums and your time. If you want to hear more from me, you can get me on Twitter at Simon Brew. You can get the entire Film Stories project on Twitter at Film Stories Pod. Our website is filmstories.co.uk, updated every weekday with reviews, features, news, all sorts of bits and bobs there. You can find our magazines and our Blu-ray at store.filmstories.co.uk. On Facebook at facebook.com/filmstoriesonline, and on YouTube at youtube.com/film stories. Most important thing, as always, is you all look after yourselves, you all take care, and I'll be back with your regular episode of the Film Stories podcast shortly. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back soon. Bye bye.